And boom, I think we are now live. Welcome to Tokyo Tonight 2. Sorry I'm late. I've actually been watching, well, one, I was working all day today. Two, I missed actually right now. Haruka and Stu are in Japan and they're having a party tonight, but I didn't get back from work until like basically 7 o'clock. So I regret I didn't make that, but I did get to see Stu from West Stu earlier this week. That was awesome. Yeah, I don't know, I've been watching a Netflix thing on, was it The Haunting of Hill House? It's actually quite good. Plus I've been spending this week on my commute watching the documentary on Netflix about the Vietnam War. It's not very uplifting, but it's actually really, really well done. So yes, too much Netflix and a busy day, but hope that you guys are all well. Good to see you all, and wow, look at that, you all just show up right away, which is awesome. Sergeant Booker, boom, yes indeed. Steve from Berkeley, good to see you. Chris, holla indeed. Tim the Asian Inc. Or the J-Vlog lads, konnichiwa, konbanwa, ohayou gozaimasu, buenos dias, annyeonghaseyo, komo vai, wherever you are, good to see you. Welcome to Tokyo Tonight too. I've got a few topics tonight. I actually think it's probably not going to be many topics tonight, but we'll see how it goes. Hey Hino, good to see you. Oh, and you're in Tokyo. Oh, well, welcome to Tokyo. Kang and Kodos, glad that you made it. I'm glad that everybody made it. Well, this is a good thing, at least, about being a little bit consistent with the time, although I'm a little bit late today. I'm so sorry about that. Good to see you all. Anyway, let's get into the topics. And yeah. So first story is actually, oh, Olivia D, good to see you. And Tai Nakamura, wow, everybody's piling in. It's awesome to see you guys. Hope you've all had a good week. I've had a good week. It's actually right now it's really the best time of the year in Tokyo. It's like just starting to get cool enough that you can see Mount Fuji. You get these beautiful sunny skies pretty much between now and January. It's cool, but you know, it's you can still. I was still wearing a t-shirt most of the day today. So yes, Sergeant Booker, I know whenever I say I don't have many topics tonight, it's not the way that it works out, but who knows. Bit of a free conversation. I'm always up for a free conversation. Remember, just like at my, well, it didn't do it there. Oh, it doesn't do it there, but it does it there actually, which is good because it looks like I'm looking at the comments. If I look over here, Olivia D, if you do the @Hiko-san and you want me to have a free conversation, I will do it. Fox Morris, boom, right back at you. Good to see you. So yes, let's get into it. Bunch of congrats, a bunch of hellos today. Maybe first thing, I've got a tweet in here actually. Well, anyway, let's get into it. Let's just get into the topics. This first topic here, that is Shinzo Abe. He has got a bill to basically accept 40,000 more foreigners into Japan, which doesn't seem like a whole lot. There are currently over, getting near 2 million now out of 120 million in Japan are foreign residents. They're expecting the new bill will allow in 40, in fact, you know what, I think it's 400,000 more, primarily in other areas of the economy that need more people. However, there's been a big debate, primarily within the LDP itself, as to do we really want more foreigners to come in and work. So, do we want more immigration? This, like, you know, right now it's very in vogue, especially for right-wing parties like the LDP itself in America and whatnot, to oppose it. And saying don't have lots of immigration like Europe. Abe has defended the whole thing, saying it's not immigration. They're just going to let in 400,000 people on working visas. And they consider the definition of immigration to be letting people in to live permanently. However, bear in mind, you cannot get a permanent residence visa if you are born in Japan and you fall in the categories of special visa, i.e. Zainichi, Korean. I believe some Chinese can get them as well. You can be born with permanent residency in Japan. But if you're not in those categories, you can only come to Japan on a marriage visa, work visa, or whatever, and you have to stay here for between 5 to 10 years before you become eligible to apply for permanent residency. So by the definition that the LDP uses of people who are allowed into Japan for the purpose of living permanently, Japan has zero immigration. That's the definition that they're using. They're trying to assure people that they're letting people in, I guess, to kick them out. But this is another problem. Again, if you're letting people in without really being prepared to accept them into society, you're kind of inviting problems. You know, there has to be some readiness to accept that. However, that's kind of, at the same time, I mean, maybe it's okay. They're dodging the whole discussion about allowing more immigrants in, but show me one country where a government proactively deciding to accept immigrants has ever really gone very well. So in a way, maybe dodging the question is actually the okay way to go. Carlos Diamante, you were arrested for being a foreigner last week. Is that in Japan or somewhere else? And I'm very sorry to hear that if that's the case. What's the story there? Actually, I'm curious to hear the story, Carlos. Was that for not having ID, or what was the... that sucks. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm curious to hear more if you don't mind sharing in the comments. Yeah, there's always this thing about, do you in a way, I mean, if this was a left-wing government doing this, you know that the right-wingers would be piling it on top of this, and it would actually be stirring up anti-foreigner sentiment, which is obviously something that I wouldn't like. So it's kind of, in a way, if this is being done, it's good that it's being done by the right-wing party. And although I don't think it's being done entirely honestly in that regard, at the same time, how honest do you want them to be? Do you want them to mess it all up? So in a way, maybe this is okay. You kind of struggle with it a little bit. I mean, fact of the matter is that even if people in the ruling party do not want, for example, more foreigners to come into the country, the government has a couple of really basic problems. There are not enough people. Well, fundamentally speaking, the government's made up of really old people, and none of the young people, they're both in number and in desire for a job career, want to take care of the old people. There's a generation of baby boomers that are coming up that basically didn't have any kids, and they're facing possibly without pensions because the tax take from the declining population is going to go down, and no one willing to take care of them. You're going to have basically old, destitute people with no one taking care. No tax money from insufficient workers in the economy, and no people wanting to work in care-based societies. So, yeah, based on that. By the way, it's a little zombie thing there on top of the table. I don't know how that got there or what that's about, but it's kind of cool. Anyway, yeah, so from that perspective, given that it's all old men in government, I mean, they realize that they need to import people to look after them. And although they say that it won't have any impact on Japanese laborers, there are people who point out, well, sure it will. I mean, there's been no increase in wages in spite of the labor shortage. Japanese workers are not getting paid more, and bringing in foreigners who are willing to work on lower wages is going to be seen as being anti-young. And indeed that's probably true, because this is old people wanting to look out for themselves. But at the same time, it's something that the society just needs, and in a way perhaps just the way that they're going about it is the right way to go about it. Question there from Fox Morris: have I ever been stopped by the police? Have I ever been stopped by the police? I'm just trying to think. I have. I've been riding a bicycle at like 1 o'clock in the morning, drunk, coming home from Shibuya with a broken light. So it must have looked like I'd stolen. I mean, again, in 19 years, I've been stopped once, and I would say, foreigner or not, probably should have been stopped in that situation. So that seems to be correct. Trying to think, I haven't really ever been. I've been stopped in Madrid. Even in Madrid, I look like a foreigner, and they stopped me, and they've asked me for my ID there. No, basically, I've managed to pretty much stay out of trouble. That said, I mean, I know that I get an easier run, perhaps, than other foreigners. I mean, even when it's obvious that I'm a foreigner, it's being white and someone who doesn't look like they're obviously going to make trouble. I mean, even with the skinhead thing. Maybe I've had a good run, but yeah, just the one time, just on a bicycle, and just stopped, showed my ID, showed that I owned the bike, and was led on my way. But yeah. That Carlos, I don't see any comment back there, so that is what it is, I guess. But yeah, stuff happens with that. Tai Nakamura, the policeman, said it was a random search, as they often do in Shibuya. They searched your bag, and then it was all good. Yeah, in Shibuya, certainly around Sentai, not so much now, but there used to be a thing where there would be like Iranian people standing on all the corners of Sentai, and the rumor is, and they did TV specials on this, and you don't see them anymore, but the rumor was that they were all selling drugs. And so the police did get in the habit of walking down the road there and searching people. Again, I don't know that you can just search people without any sort of cause, but they were doing that as just regular policing. So yeah. In terms of the new jobs that are going to be allowed, the new types of work visas, presently you're only allowed in for an arts and humanities visa, and a in fact, what are the two at the moment? Oh no, I'm sorry, this is totally different. This is not the immigration thing. This is talking about the new categories of especially highly skilled workers that will be exempt from overtime. So these are the ones that it'll be basically okay to abuse and treat like a black company, like companies that abuse workers. And by the way, welcome. I see some extra people in the comments. I see A9907, welcome. And Yasa, good to see you as well. Carlos Diamante, there we go. In Odaiba, you found a broken phone late at night, then you lost your wallet in the early morning. Oh, pardon me, this is in Odaiba. I went to a police station to report about your wallet, but they decided to check your bag. That's funny that, yeah, they would. I mean, that's pretty lazy policing as well, that they would choose to pick on you after you went to the police station. They found the broken phone and thought that you stole it. Oh, that's really odd. I'm sorry to hear that. But yes, anyway, so coming back, in terms of the industries that you will be allowed to basically treat as a black kigyo, one is in the financial services industry, so selling financial products. So for example, financial research, basically anything with special sort of financial knowledge, so basically I would assume equity traders or whatever, excluding people who do the data entry and the basic work associated with that. They'll be able to abuse. The other one is Kinyu Dira, so this is for, I see, so the second one is for traders, is actually for fund managers, stock traders, dealers and whatnot. The one up above is financial instrument researchers, so both basically financial companies. Excluded from that are people who support those, like the secretaries or whatever, I would assume is what they mean by that. The third category that they have are analysts, specifically people with a high degree of expertise. Well, that's pretty vague. I mean, this looks like just a regular sort of consultants. It's analysts, but basically highly skilled sort of analysts. Again, they're going to be exempt from overtime. That's pretty vague. So basically, again, data entry is going to be exempted from the overtime, unlimited overtime. Again, another category, consultant, which can also be super vague, but basically people who give advice on strategic, basically management consulting advice. Again, support staff, whatever, going to be exempt from that. And the final one is R&D, research and development. High-tech research and development will also be exempt. And I guess this is how they exempt people who are working, for example, on nuclear reactors and whatnot. And again, their sort of support staff are going to be subject to the regular laws, to the regular limits. But you're basically going to be able to work to death. R&D people, consultants, analysts, share traders, and financial instrument researchers, which sucks if you're going for any of those. But yeah, I mean, just the fact that you have the limits on overtime are based on health standards and recognized standards above which people can and will work to death or kill themselves, and yet for these types of jobs, which are pretty vaguely defined, they're going to allow companies to not have to impose the working to death limits on them, which seems kind of ridiculous to me. But that's what happens. And the first job that I ever did in Japan, I was a consultant, and I was actually at that time, it was, at first they said it was not regulated, but that was their own interpretation. Then, because there were so many people dying in IT consulting, people getting seriously sick, the government came in and said, no, you do have to pay them overtime, and they are protected. Now they're actually going to unprotect them with this legislation, which to me is insane. But yeah. Sergeant Bilko, any mentioning of Japanese language skills? Yes, there is mentioning of Japanese language skills for the new job categories, which I think I've got in another article. I'm not sure if it's one of the ones that I bookmarked for the show tonight, but yes, you'll require a basic level of Japanese to be able to qualify for the other visas, but not a high degree. So you should be fine with that. So yes, congrats right here to the people who are behind English Pod 101. So basically, if you've been watching the show that Alicia presents, Teaching English, this is the celebration party, but they have 2 million subscribers. It's a big team of people, as you can see, all Japan based. So this Japanese Pod 101 that a lot of you guys might use, the same outfit that makes it also makes the English Pod 101, which has been globally very, very successful. Yeah, that is the whole team that makes it. But you talk about people who are seriously focused about making consistently good content that's useful to people, and they've gotten 2 million subscribers. So yeah, that's a lot of hard work in and a good result out, so congratulations to you guys. And yeah, if you're learning Japanese, check out Japanese Pod 101. If you're learning English, check out English Pod 101, or just listen to me, of course, because you'll be speaking perfect English if you watch this show every week. Probably not a good idea, but you'll be getting good sleep, so that's a good idea. The Sergeant Bilko, any mentioning? Oh, that's right, sorry, that's the comment that you read before. There are no new comments, so that's okay. Let's go forward on to the next one. The Expanse is coming back November 15. It's moving from Netflix. I think it was on Sci-Fi as well, like the cable TV channel, and it got momentarily cancelled, but Amazon decided to sponsor it for the 3rd season. And it was I really liked season 1 and season 2, so it's coming back. It's going to be on Amazon Prime, which I have, so I am looking forward to that, and it's awesome. Go check that out. Looking forward to that. I made a track during this week. I actually made it on the iPhone, and it's the first one I made for a while, and it's just a bunch of very, very high speed. It's 172 BPM, basically some sort of hardcore techno kind of, and just sounds and beeping and really fast. I made it on the train, and I thought it sounded good enough, so I uploaded it, and check it out. It's called Fast Focus. That is a picture of a plane that was overtaking the flight I took to Seattle, my last flight to the US, which is kind of cool, but the track's quite good, so you can check that out. In fact, if I play it, will you hear it? No, you might do, but I won't worry about that. But anyway, that is kind of cool. What else have we got here? So for the Halloween drama this year, yeah, and this is all kind of a little bit in reverse order, but basically, so you'll recall on the Saturday before Halloween was like in the middle of the week this year. And give me 1 second here. I'll be okay. Sorry, I'm a bit blocked up at the moment. So yes, the Halloween, the weekend preceding Halloween, a lot of people went to Shibuya for parties. And now Shibuya, by the way, is pretty much the place that if you're like under 25 and you want to go and drink or party or whatever, if there's a World Cup, if there's, anything sort of, sports or New Year's or whatever, everyone pretty much goes to Shibuya. And it's always been kind of, well, not always, but for as long as I've been in Japan, it's been the place that, if you are young and in Japan, it's certainly the place that you sort of want to go for parties. And I used to live really close to there myself, and I love living around there. So yeah, it's become, as much as Halloween has become the foremost place to have party, to go party and dress up for Halloween. There are other places, by the way. Ikebukuro has also become pretty big for that. Tai Nakamura asks, have I ever been to Shibuya for Halloween? And I'm not sure that I have. You know what, I might not have. I've been to Roppongi. I'm pretty sure I would have been through Shibuya when I was living near there, but at the same time, Halloween's really only gotten big in the last 10 years or so. But yes, so, and every year people get kind of stupider. They pretty much... Barry Bonds, are you literally watching from Mogadishu, Somalia? That is awesome. Wow, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, so I thought for a minute you said that watching Shibuya was like watching Mogadishu, Somalia, which it definitely wasn't, although the Japanese media seemed to be making out that it was, and that's kind of the point. Whenever, it's kind of funny, whenever you have, like I said this last week, whenever you have drunk people basically in America or New Zealand or Australia, young people with alcohol and boredom and a chance to blow off steam or whatever, they're watching like a hockey game or a football game, whatever, they go and they set buildings on fire, they flip over cars, they do all sorts of stuff. And apparently during last weekend there was an incident where a small light truck was tipped over on its side, again by some confused, energetic, hyper drunk kids who probably did put the car back up apparently, but still they did tip it up on its side, and it got on the press, and of course everyone else in Japan watching Shibuya gone insane and completely unable to comprehend what they're watching. This is pretty much Shibuya has kind of become an image for basically the same way that we look at, like, for example, in Australia, look at schoolies or end of year parties that just get more and more out of control every year. Japan is way at the other end of the scale of really not being very out of control at all, but by Japanese standards it's pretty much out of control. There were 5 people arrested that night, 13 people arrested on the actual Halloween night, again just for general drunken disorderliness. It went off fairly timidly, but there were a lot of people there. The end result of it is that, and also there was a lot of garbage. Now again, a few years ago actually, there was somebody who went and put a bunch of pipe bombs into rubbish bins around Tokyo, as well as lockers, and there was a reaction to that they took all the rubbish bins away. There was also, what they found was, when they took the rubbish bins away, when there had been this sort of spate of pipe bombings, no one was killed by them, but a few people were injured by them. But yes, we ended up with a situation where there were no rubbish bins left anymore in Shibuya. And a funny thing happened when they took all the rubbish bins out of Shibuya. People stopped. The people didn't know where to throw their rubbish. So when they put a rubbish bin there, everybody thought it was okay to put their rubbish there. And it being Shibuya with too many people, they would put their stuff into the rubbish bin. And when the rubbish bin would become full, like within 1 hour, and it only got cleaned out once a day, people would start throwing their rubbish around the rubbish bin, and it would just become, the rubbish bin would become a mountain of rubbish. Yet when they took the rubbish bin away, nobody knew where it was okay to throw their rubbish anymore, and people started holding on to their rubbish and carrying it home or taking it somewhere else where there were rubbish bins. So it proved to be like a psychological experiment that proved that actually removing rubbish bins actually reduced littering, and so it became the strategy under Ishihara to remove rubbish bins from all over Tokyo. And it had this funny result that people would actually not litter as much when there were no rubbish bins. It's counterintuitive, and it's kind of aggravating when you're expecting there to be a rubbish bin and you can't find one. But this is what they did. However, with Halloween, there was rubbish everywhere. You know, people were drinking and throwing their drinks away. A lot of the restaurants and so on have started to react to this. They started closing early. The convenience stores, from a social responsibility perspective, stopped selling alcohol there right nearby. Steve from Berkeley says this works in Japan only. Perhaps it does, but it was working. And it's annoying that it works, but it works. The end result, however, was, of course, there ended up being a whole lot of rubbish there. Boom. And the next day, a whole bunch of volunteers cleaned it up, just as you'd expect in Japan, although again, you know, other countries you'd have a lot of paid people cleaning it up. So in a way, it kind of shows, you know, the good and bad of Japan at the same time. It's like it still is relatively innocent, I'd say, on the scale of things for something like this. Oh, pardon me. Sorry, I had to get the sneeze out. But at the same time, you know, by Japanese standards, they've considered this sort of thing like Halloween has become actual Halloween. It's become an actual night of zombie monsters. And the mayor of Shibuya is saying, this is too much, enough is enough. Next year we should make people pay to come to Shibuya for Halloween. So if you went to Halloween before Tai Nakamura, I hope you did it, because you might have to pay for it next year, which would just be intended to kill it. But this is again what happens when you have elderly people scared of young people running the young neighborhoods. The mayor of Shibuya now wants to shut it all down or make people pay for it, which would be stupid. Thank you, Steve from Berkeley, for the bless you. So yeah. Yeah, so they removed rubbish bins from Adelaide Central Railway due to terrorist concerns, because there's been so many terrorist attacks in Australia. I don't know if you're being sarcastic by that. Australia has had terrorism problems, and they have, I've heard, preemptively stopped certain attacks or whatever. J-Vlog, sorry about that. It's actually the new, it's a 5D broadcast. It's experimental. That is the downside of it, that you do catch all the spray from the sneezing, so sorry about that. So you can see anyway that the volunteers were cleaning up the next morning. So again, I'd still say Japan's doing pretty well on the party regards of being kind of responsible young people. But there you go. I'm going to blow my nose actually, because I'm a little bit stuffed up. Just give me 1 second. Let me mute that. And boom, we are back. That's much better now. Okay. I realize when I come back with a red nose and red eyes and feeling groovy, it looks like I've been doing lines or something off the camera, but no, seriously, I was just blowing my nose. Yeah. So there was something this week which I don't want to call specific people out about this. It's just something I started to ask, is this a thing? And this is a question for the people watching. Tell me, is this a thing? Is it a thing? Is it like normal to you guys when you ask somebody for a favor, but you kind of want to lighten it and make it seem kind of friendly, and that when you ask somebody for a favor, that you end it with LOL? You know, hey, Coming to Tokyo, can you tell me some things I should do? LOL. I guess that they're trying to be, that they're trying to throw in kind of it's a light-hearted question and don't take it too serious or whatever. To me, it sounds, it's basically like laughing at a completely doesn't make sense sort of a time. You're asking me a favor, which I'm perfectly happy to say to you, but I do find I get a little bit aggravated when people like put LOL like on the end of a question. Like, why not say, could you please help me find some things to do in Tokyo, or could you please do this for me? Putting an LOL is kind of like, it reminds me of Tommy Wiseau in The Room, sort of talking, laughing at stuff, which, like, why in the hell is he laughing at that? Like, that doesn't make sense. I find it really aggravating. Shivers confirmed on Twitter that she finds it aggravating, but maybe this is me getting old. Certainly, I feel like saying, how about no, LOL. I mean, it's LOL, right? It could be a joke, it could be anything. I'm not showing any respect to you. Why not? Can you do me a favor, Phil? Fox Morris, I like that interpretation. LOL, yeah, they usually it's to show that you're only joking or being sarcastic, which maybe, but sometimes I've had cases where people are actually asking me for stuff. I'm okay with it, but it's like, I'm slightly pissed off that you put an LOL at the end of asking me for a favor. Like, screw you, LOL. I don't know, but I get it. They're trying to soften it. I think that's it. It's stupid, but that's serious. So yes, I kind of get you. I think that I get the feeling that's what they're trying to do, and I get the feeling I'm wrong to be aggravated and annoyed, and as Shivers said, put it to actually want to punch people in the face. Can you stop punching me in the face? LOL. I mean, but to me, that's kind of what it is, right? So maybe this is culture. Yes, I think yes, you probably captured it there, and maybe this is just me being old and cranky, but it happens, and it feels like that guy when I see it. I see that, and I say, I know you don't mean it like that, but I just want to anyway. So yes, the next one that I've got, I hope you're keeping up with Ami Yamato, who is still awesome and amazing, and not only is she actually like, so you remember there are lots of virtual YouTube idols and whatnot out there. There's Kizuna Ai and all of these sort of, particularly now coming out of Japan, but again, there's different approaches that you can take to it. There are the old Logicam virtual faces, and some of them are getting to be very well done now, and you can actually go, I could do it in real time. I could make myself look like a CG anime in real time or whatever and do it. But there are certain virtual YouTubers out there that if you look at what they do, you'll realize they're doing a lot more than that actually. And Ami Yamato was seriously like the first, and is still, if you ask me, far and away like the best, because when you look at it, it's made to look like it's not being anything. At first it's kind of special, but then you think, oh, it's just doing that, it's just automated or something, and then you realize, oh shit, it's not. So still the first and still the best, if you ask me. And on top of that, actually an excellent sense of humor and fantastic editing skills. If you look at her, some of her milestone videos as well, they're just awesome. So this latest one of Beyonce at Jabba's Palace is pretty awesome actually, so definitely check that out, because yes, these things are very, very good, and you should all know about them and do them. Another one, I think I've mentioned this before, speaking about Halloween. It's kind of this famous thing. This goes all the way back to the 90s, back before Halloween was even that big a deal in Japan. The Yamaguchi Gumi organized crime syndicate, traditionally the biggest organized crime syndicate in Japan, but based in Kansai. Their headquarters are in Kobe. This great big house. Apparently one thing, very Godfather-ish, was that they'd, every year they'd invite all the local kids on Halloween into the Yakuza headquarters, where they would give them lots of sweets. I mean, I guess the kids couldn't really refuse the offer to come in for the candy. This still goes on this year, and this year again there were a whole bunch of protesters. I mean, the Yamaguchi Gumi itself has gone from the 90s, when it was actually one of the largest corporations in Japan economically, to having split apart, had some feuds to Yakuza themselves, just going down in terms of their influence in society and the economy, and now a whole bunch of protesters going around that even Halloween. Please don't think that you can dress up your image as being anything other than violent, horrible gangsters. Please go away, are the protesters. I like to joke that the Yamaguchi Gumi showed up to Halloween dressed in costumes as themselves. But they still, and of course, Rocket News is kind of making light of the situation, asking, what will the kids have to do when it comes time to repay them for all the years of candy that they got? I don't know, but yes, that is some messed up stuff, but it's actually probably more a part of Japanese Halloween tradition than a lot of other things. I met this fine man. I'm sorry I couldn't come tonight, Stu. I'm sorry I couldn't, but it was really, really awesome to see you, especially after he's just been in New Zealand for like 2 weeks, I think it was. And I must admit, what really impressed me about, Stu is an awesome guy to begin with. I mean, you all know where Stu, he's better looking and more talented than me, and he's doing a bunch of really, really awesome stuff at the moment. He's been living back in the UK, in Birmingham, I think. His band is doing awesome. It's starting to get some gigs and stuff. He's had a lot of really cool stuff going on. But what I really loved was, okay, now he's been to New Zealand, so I was kind of curious, and he had been driving all over the North Island, which is where I grew up, which made me assume he probably would have come across a small town on the main state highway that I used to live, known by New Zealanders as the worst town in New Zealand that I lived for a couple of... It's kind of a point of pride that I lived in the worst town in New Zealand for a number of years. He went to some really nice parts of New Zealand for the wedding, and I asked, because I didn't want to go straight to the small town that I lived in, because I assumed even if he drove through it, he wouldn't register. So I picked a bigger town nearby. That is, New Zealand's become a lot more politically correct than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, white people would deliberately mispronounce Maori place names, and even I went to a school that was predominantly Maori. Or Maori, if you pronounce it correctly. But again, it was sort of like, even in front of like my Maori friends, if you correctly pronounced place names with the Maori pronunciation, you would actually get shit like, whoa, why are you being all fancy with the correct pronunciation? Say it like everybody else. So you'd almost deliberately like butcher the pronunciation of place names. New Zealand place names should be pronounced as if you're reading them in Japanese. Japanese language is actually phonetically the same as Maori, pretty much. So I asked if he'd been to Taupo. And Taupo is a big town in the middle of a relatively big town that has a Kentucky Fried Chicken, which makes it a big town by my measure, living in a small town in New Zealand in the centre of the North Island. I said, did you go to Taupo? Because it was close to the town that I used to live in. He went through there. There's a chance he went to the town that I used to live in. And he was like, yeah, I did, but isn't that like the inappropriate way to pronounce it? I was like, oh my god, yes it is. Yes it is. I remember getting shit for saying Taupo correctly as a kid. I remember having a Maori teacher in a Maori class talking about going to Taupo, and people go, yeah, why are you saying that? And the teacher said, no, Hiko's saying it correctly. He's being a good boy Hiko. And I'm like, oh, shut up, now I'm gonna get beaten up at lunchtime. Don't do that. But he noticed it, which is probably one, is a sign that, wow, he went to New Zealand for 2 weeks and he's already correcting me on pronunciation of place names. And two, it probably shows that, again, I haven't lived in New Zealand for 20 years, and it shows that maybe New Zealand has moved along a bit in this regard, which was actually kind of cool. But man, Steve is just an awesome guy, and I'm really sorry I couldn't hang out tonight, but I'm looking forward to the next chance to hang out, and it's good to see you back in Japan, and a safe trip back to UK. So yes indeed, me being inappropriate, I'm always appropriate, as you know, but sometimes again, I was a little bit too woke as a 10-year-old. That's caught up to me. I've become basically a redneck again, so what can you do? Oh, now this has been some interesting news. There's a couple of interesting things here. Actually, I want to come back while we're talking about New Zealand. Let me go here. This is a marae. Marae. In fact, you always say marae in English, again, incorrectly, and if I say it correctly, it's marae, but, it's basically a meeting house, which is on the territory, is on the property of the New Zealand Embassy in Tokyo, which is in the very flash neighbourhood of Shoto, right beside Shibuya. And I got an invite from the Auckland University, where I went to university in New Zealand. I got an invite to an old boys sort of, an alumni meeting that was going to be held at the embassy. And I haven't been there in like 10 years, and I kind of thought, I should go along there once in a while. I used to be a coordinator. So I went along there, and it was fun. It was the first time I've stood on New Zealand soil for a while. Technically, the embassy is New Zealand soil. It was really cool to see some New Zealand culture. The food, we had lamb, we had pavlova, we had the marae with the New Zealand carvings and whatever, and we had this sort of talk, and it was kind of funny being in a room of 30 New Zealanders. I mean, it's good. I must admit, when you're away from New Zealand for a long time, and when I go back, I go back to Australia more often. I'm an Australian. My mum's Australian, and I go back to Australia, right? So I'm half Australian, and I go back to Australia more often than I go back to New Zealand, which makes me kind of forget what New Zealand culture's like. So it's actually really nice. I don't have that much connection to New Zealand anymore, and it's nice to go back and be in a room full of 30 Kiwis. But then I started to get these reminders of New Zealand culture, and it reminded me, whenever I watch Flight of the Conchords, it's kind of like, oh yeah, Kiwis are like that, but that's exaggerated. But that's kind of, and there were some in jokes. I mean, there are a lot of New Zealand in jokes packed into Flight of the Conchords, as you can imagine. But a lot of you think, yeah, well, it's like that, but just not that much. They're just playing it up as a joke. But then you hang around with other Kiwis and you realize, oh my God, that's not even a joke. I mean, it's they're self-aware enough to make fun of themselves, but it's like we're all in this sort of room which can fit probably 100 people, but there's only 30 people there. The speaker's at the front, and everybody's huddled at the back end of the room, and the speaker's like multiple lines. Please, everybody, please, can you please come further forward in the room, because our voices won't get all the way over to you. And everyone's like, kind of too shy. I mean, everyone's literally too shy. They're all huddled at the back of the room, and even when they're like coaxed forward, they sort of reluctantly kind of come forward. They don't want to go too far forward because you look like you're sort of all arrogant or whatever. And when people are like introducing themselves, they'll say, oh yeah, I work at a bank, but it's not very much of a bank. I'm not up myself or anything. People are literally like putting themselves down in their self-introductions, and because everyone's afraid of being seen like they're arrogant or like they're better than other people. And again, I'm sufficiently Australian that I don't care. As New Zealanders go, I mean, just the fact that I'm doing this is not something that New Zealanders do. I'm the loudest, most obnoxious, self-centered dickhead New Zealander that you're ever going to meet, and it's kind of funny because I don't hang around New Zealanders very much. I feel like I'm the most Kiwi person I know, but then I hang around with real Kiwis and it's like, oh my God, yeah, this is what it's really like. And it was fun. I mean, again, everyone in the room was super nice. The talk was super interesting. The food was great. It was cool to hang out on this thing, but I kind of got this reminder that it's really like a band meeting with everyone is just kind of crazy. There aren't any New Zealand vloggers. There are a couple, but I tell you what, not in New Zealand. Like Mime can do it, but it's partly because she's not in New Zealand. If he did it in New Zealand, everyone's like, oh, why is he putting his face on the? He thinks he's so good. He's putting his face on the internet. It's all up himself. It's a bit strange. You get serious shit for that. You would. I'm obviously not planning to go back. That's why I keep doing this. But plus no one there remembers me anymore. All my family left. People probably can remember. That's the other problem. This is the other thing. Every single person in that room, I talked to them for 60 seconds and I could figure out someone that we knew in common. And we all went to the same university but different years and stuff like that. So again, I kind of love the New Zealand culture shock, but every time it is a shock to me going back to New Zealand, because it's like it's different. Russell Crowe's Australian, and all New Zealanders are proud to call Russell Crowe an Australian. He's Australian. But there we go. So that was kind of funny. We've got so this week there's been an interesting talk about a bit of controversy. The Korean-Japanese relations started up again. So there was a ruling by the Supreme Court of Korea that there were 4 surviving laborers who were basically conscripted to work in Japanese wartime production during World War II, unpaid, for 3 years, from 1943 to 1945, I believe it was. And they had sued these companies. In this case, I believe it was Japan Steel, for being conscripted to work in Japanese factories during World War II, and they had sought $80,000 compensation, so not a large amount. However, they'd basically failed at all levels in the court system in Korea, because when Japan signed a diplomatic recognition and peace treaty with Korea in 1965, Japan paid South Korea $500 million, which, is a lot by today's money standards, but back in 1965, you can imagine that was quite, it was a big payment for the time, especially bearing in mind that Japan was still, not fully in the boom phase yet. And the idea, one thing that was explicitly put into the treaty that was kept secret from the Korean people. At the time, Korea was under a military dictatorship of the father of the last president of Korea, And he was kind of pro-Japan. He actually worked for the Japanese military during World War II, and he was the guy who signed the peace treaty. And it was agreed within the treaty that the treaty was to settle all war-related claims between Korea and Japan, with the idea being that that money was to be given to Korea to settle war reparations in whatever manner that the Korean government saw fit. And the Korean government decided to use all of that money to spend on building infrastructure after the Korean War, and to allow for basically to build up the country to a position that it could become the economic miracle that it became. But it did not choose to give that compensation to individuals wanting to make individual property or personal claims from World War II, although technically the money was paid to settle all claims. Because the treaty exists, Japan always said Korea has a treaty obligation to not reckon, to handle. The Korean government has to settle these claims itself. And in the lower courts in Korea, each one of these claims that have been made against about 70 Japanese companies have always failed. They always traditionally failed, because Korean courts recognized that the right to make the claims internationally were extinguished by the 1965 treaty between Japan and South Korea. However, there's this thing: Japan seems to find ways to piss Korea off all the time, including with the comfort women, with the territorial claims, just with general expediency. I mean, whenever presidents there go down in the polls, which, given that the last few have committed suicide or all ended up in jail, they have bad rides, and whenever they have bad rides, the only thing guaranteed to give them any sort of peace is to be able to bash on Japan. And so, when times get rough there, it is something that happens. They'll bash on Japan. And politically, sometimes the governments for a long time basically supported basically not allowing these lawsuits to happen against Japanese companies, which is kind of awkward, obviously, because it looks like you're siding with the Japanese wartime government by prohibiting these things. And for a long time they didn't even explain properly the reason why this was the case. However, when it became known, people pointed out, well, the Korean government that made the treaty was a dictatorship. It wasn't a democracy, and they sold everybody out. It's unconscionable that they should be denied their rights as individuals to be able to claim from the companies that they worked for. Basically that's what the South Korean top Supreme Court basically came to a conclusion, which was that even if a treaty exists, it's against public policy to hold that these people are not entitled to personal compensation from the companies that benefited from their labor. And this is something which I'm sympathetic to. Certainly these people were forced to work for free. It was conscripted labor. So look, this happened in every country, people conscripting their own, mobilizing citizens for labor during the war, and Koreans at the time were Japanese citizens. But no question, Koreans were treated differently to regular Japanese. Certainly they were forced into giving labor that they were not paid for, and they were entitled to compensation for it. But that compensation was given to the South Korean government to resolve these claims, and the South Korean government hasn't paid them compensation. And when they've gone to, and when it's been politically expedient, they've encouraged these people to go to or certainly not discouraged them from going to the courts. Now the courts are saying that basically these it's unconscionable to not give them compensation, and rather than claim against the government and make taxpayers pay for it because the money's all been spent, let them go and claim against Japanese companies. So what's happened is it set off basically a firestorm of opposition and whatnot. So the 5 aspects of this, what's this case is about, that's what I just sort of talked about. The 65 Treaty is a treaty which established relations. It was kept secret from the Korean population because the government there knew they'd get super pissed off if they found out that their government had sold them out in exchange for money from Japan. The compensation is still the question, basically because of the a change of interpretation of how the Korean courts handle these cases. And for bilateral ties, well, the Japanese government is now getting tough, and this is the thing. It's the same with whaling. It's the same with the comfort women. It's the same with this. Even where it's the same with Dokdo as well, with Takeshima, the island Takeshima. Even when the Japanese government is technically, even when it has a point of being technically righteous, it just is never going to be able to avoid looking like a dickhead, right? The fact is, none of this misfortune would have fallen upon Japan if they simply had never colonized South Korea in the first place. And this is what happens. I mean, when Japanese companies profiteer from using Korean labor, when all of these things that arise from misdeeds from Japanese government or whatever during World War II happen, this is sort of the price that you get for colonialism. The Japanese government is saying that, you know, they're going to have to, you know, Japanese companies are all going to have to withdraw from Korea to protect their assets from similar claims if this is now a binding court case. The Japanese government is demanding that the Korean government meet its obligations under the treaty by paying these people a compensation instead of Japanese companies. And that's a position that right now the current left-wing anti-Japanese government probably doesn't want to take. So it's going to be, unfortunately, it once again means that the relations are going to head into a bad time for this. But we'll see. ASTF 1231, nobody gives any money back. That's an international rule. Pointing to John's comment, what did John say? This is your first time watching in a while. Missed it. I love your blog. Glad that you like it, John McRoberts, and good to have you here. Do I deserve a bashing? It is a deserved bashing, is the point there. But ASTF in Japan never formally apologized for anything or something like that. Well, they formally apologized. I think the count is now up to 25 times. But the apologies don't get accepted, and you know, you don't have to accept an apology. Again, Korea's the wrong party, Japan is the right party. I think it's disingenuous. If they don't want compensation and they don't want an apology, don't pretend that you want one. I mean, because Japan has made sincere apologies and payments of compensation to the comfort women and for the wartime labor. It's all been done. But you know, at the same time, people there are bitter, and they're entitled to their bitterness. That, you know, they are the victims of Japan, and they don't have to shut up about it because Japan's tired of hearing about it. But at the same time, you know, they shouldn't pretend that it's not something that. It basically means that even though Japan technically is right that they have paid the compensation for this, and the South Korean government really should take care of this, which technically I agree with, it certainly doesn't look very good saying that, especially the people who are essentially Japanese slave labor. So I get the feeling this is probably going to get resolved with Japan having to pay more money, and the amounts aren't very large, but the consequences are that 70 other Japanese companies that have operations in Korea might have to withdraw, which means people losing their jobs and withdrawal of assets, which is also going to increase the aggro against Japan, which is also terrible when you think about the thing with North Korea happening at the moment. And you know, basically, again, every opportunity to try to resolve things with South Korea and Japan just never seems to come together, which is just a shame. So it's a little bit like that, you know. And the fact is, I mean, even with the comfort woman thing, they got the money, they got the offer of a written apology from the Japanese Prime Minister, and yet the comfort women groups that opposed the settlement said no. They demand that Shinzo Abe come and, you know, lay down on the floor begging for each one of their forgiveness. I.e., it's impossible, right? And they're entitled to their anger. They're entitled to stay angry. They, you know, and they've made, maybe they value that more than they value the small amounts of compensation that ended up being set aside for them in the Comfort Women Fund. Here with these workers as well, I mean, they're basically at the end of their lives, and there still is a question here about how they're going to be compensated. Unfortunately, it's another torpedo in the relations of these two countries, which I really wish would get along. I really wish they'd get along, and I really wish that there were a path that Japan could, you know, fix this in a way that would be sincerely accepted by both sides. The 65 Treaty was supposed to be it for these sorts of claims, but we'll see what happens anyway. It's kind of a shame that it's happened like this, but at the same time, it's also a shame, no question, that these workers never got any compensation back for their labor. And, you know, the rumors are that the South Korean government's going to look for a compromise way, probably something like the Comfort Women Fund, which will be co-funded by possibly Japanese government or these sort of companies and the Korean government. But the Japanese LDP is putting its foot down and saying, if these people are to be compensated, it's got to be paid out of the compensation money given to the South Korean government and paid by them. So it'll be interesting. They're actually, you know, it doesn't look very good shouting at the Korean, you know, when you've lost a war case, saying that the Korean government has to resolve it. But that's the way that Japan's reacting. So we'll see how that plays out. Non-native creative, I think I mentioned this a couple of times. So this is Alicia's side project. Of course, she's famous. I mentioned her before. Just got 2 million subs for for English Pod 101, which is going really, really awesome. But she's also got this project, which is basically featuring not just in Japan, apparently it's going to be, but basically non-native, so sort of not necessarily expat, but not non-local creators in different countries, and how they sort of do creative projects. And the first one that she's got there is David Jones Elliott. But yes, she's basically going and building these out now, and yeah, featuring different creators in different contexts and so on, and is building up the series, and it's well worth looking at and supporting. So go and subscribe to Non-Native Creative, and I think there's another one she mentioned this week is going to be coming out soon, so go and check that. Yes, I mentioned earlier about how the Shibuya mayor, again, this is a little bit certainly old people versus young people, but and young people being confused about how to have parties, and not sure if they want to become like foreign hooligans, or exactly what they're supposed to do. Kind of mild, but yes, still unfortunately going to make it suck for the people the following year, so you kind of wish that they wouldn't. In terms of the foreign workers, I think, which I mentioned before, people know that if there aren't more workers, there won't be enough people paying tax to pay for the pensions of the elderly people, and no one to look after them. And pretty much all the people who are going into retirement right now realize that their kids do not want to become elderly care workers, and there are not enough of them when it's just one kid and two parents. They don't want to look after them. So they realize, again, most of Japanese realize, it's ironic, most young people are not liberal, and the opposition to immigration you'd expect maybe comes from elderly conservatives, but a lot of elderly conservatives realize that this is in their interests. And it's actually young people who online are worried about foreigners coming and undercutting their wages and stopping them getting pay rises. We're not even there yet, it's all theoretical at the moment. But this is probably what's behind. Probably pretty rare in the OECD that you have countries where people overwhelmingly support accepting more foreign workers, but Japan does. Ironic for Japan as well, I guess. That's Mount Fuji. When I talked about how lovely it is this time of year with the clear air and skies and whatnot, that is basically, you don't really get to see Mount Fuji all summer just because of the hazy skies. But then it clears up, and yeah, took that photo the other day, and that is lovely. That is the New Zealand Embassy. That is, again, Shibuya partying ridiculousness. And that is the end of the show, and it's 11:30, so right on the dot there. Any questions, any topics? If not, that's the end of the show. I guess, although I started 10 minutes late, we finished on the dot. So it was actually shorter than usual, but we finished on time. But yes, any questions, any comments, any thoughts? If not, I guess we'll wrap it up. I'm going to go back to finishing watching the episode of the Haunting of the Hill House, or so, whatever it's called. But that was quick. I guess it was ASF 12131, but there we go. There wasn't actually a lot of news this week. You don't like the end of the show, says Steve from Berkeley. Well, I don't know. I could play a tune. I could do something. I do that for 5 minutes, although typically these things are not, especially when I'm not that prepared for it. They don't always go that great. But got a quick tune? I can do that. Let's hook up the old machine and we'll do an outro. Boom, 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 boom. Alrighty. Let's put it over into chord mode. Let's hook her up. Okay, praise all the knowing clouds. Let's do a new one, new loop. And I've been installing a lot of new loops the other day, so let's go for a new beat. It's a bit 80s. Okay. hi-hat. That's the right spot. slightly toned in the wrong places. Let's do that again. Well, that's nice. Okay, that's it. That's kind of nice. Bass is quite right. quite a nice track. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'm going to play around with that one. I think that's quite a good loop. And I will see you all later. Have a good week. Ka kite anō. Peace. Don't forget, hit like if you liked. Have a good week, everyone.